It is a fireside. No, there's a meeting fireside. There's food at the fireside. Things that are waited this evening. We'll start with opening hymn number 249, Call to Serve, followed by Mitchell Fakey offering the opening prayer.
Please help us to feel the Spirit as Colton talks to us about his mission. And take you from your blessings. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ tonight.
Thank you, Mitchell. Thanks, Sister Holland and Sister Parker for the music. Without further ado, we'll introduce Mr. Faith.
I'd have a few notes because sometimes I forget things. So tonight, I didn't really want this to be a super formal thing, like a sacrament meeting or anything. So at any time, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Not all the questions at a time, but if you have any questions at all, please don't be shy to just ask. Well, I served in the California Fresno Mission, and it was wonderful. I served Spanish speaking, so I learned Spanish best I could. And although I was a Spanish missionary, I did a lot of English work as well. I was for my first two transfers, I was in Spanish only, and then the rest of my mission, I was just in one city after that, but it was English and then just a little bit of Spanish. So I guess it was a great experience to have that. I wanted to share a few stories though, just about some recent converts. If I get to them all, that's great. If I don't, I'm sorry. But I guess I'll start with them. One of them, I guess this is one of my favorite stories. There's this man named David. He's in his late 40s now, and he'd been in and out of jail and prison for different things, and he was a member. And there's this last time that he went into prison. He was there for 6 years, and he decided this time that he was going to change his life. And through the atonement of Jesus Christ, that is possible, and he realized that. And going into it, he had that attitude. So he completely changed. And while he was there, he started this group in this prison called Avenal, I don't know where it is in California, but he started teaching people the gospel. And he had this group coming. Sometimes they had up to 50, 60 people there every week. and it was super. It was a great program that he started in his prison, and it was interesting. I was with one of my companions who I was with for the majority of my mission. His name was Elder Neesmith, or Scott now. But we were companions, and we got this phone call from this man. His name was Chuck Criswell, and he just said, "Hey, elders, I've been looking for your number for a while. I want to meet with you. I want to get baptized." And we're just like, "What?" I mean, that doesn't happen every day, right, sisters? No, it doesn't usually happen. So we were thinking, what is this? And then he had told us in this message that he had just gotten out of prison and that he was kind of going through a rough time, but that he wanted to learn the gospel and get baptized. So we were like, wait, is this kind of a trap? You know, so we weren't sure going into it what exactly was going to happen. But he wanted to feed us. He heard that people always love to feed the missionaries, and so he wanted to feed us. So we went over there for lunch, and not really knowing what to expect, we were kind of on our toes a little bit. But he was a wonderful man, and he didn't, of course, he couldn't join the church while he was in prison, but he had been converted to it 3 years before that. He'd read the Book of Mormon over 10 times, and he memorized all the scripture masteries, which I guess in that situation you have time to do that. But he had a lot of knowledge, and we started teaching him, and he was golden. I mean, we really didn't teach him; he taught us sometimes, so it was wonderful. And he was baptized, and in the process, there's another man named Ed Fuller, and now Ed came from a pretty rough background as well. And Ed and Chuck were pretty good friends before he went to prison, and so he talked to him about it. And Ed at first he said, "No, I'm not doing this." And so he invited him to come on a church tour. And I wasn't with Elder Neesmith at this time. There was a time when we weren't companions who were put back together again. But this is during a time when we weren't companions. And they took Ed on a church tour, and they asked him if he would read the Book of Mormon. And he said, "I will not read that book. I will not join this church. I just came because Chuck invited me to come." And then Elder Neesmith asked him, "Well, will you come to church this Sunday?" And I loved how I told the story. He said, and the way he would tell it, he said, in my mind, I was thinking, no, there's no way in heck I'm coming to church. That's just not going to happen. But what came out was yes. And which wasn't what he was expecting. And so they're like, "Oh, great." So he came, and 3 months later he was baptized. And at that time I was with Elder Neesmith again, so I was there through part of his conversion process and his baptism. So just from one man deciding that he was going to change the things that he was doing, that he was going to apply the atonement in his life, 2 other people are brought into the gospel, and from that, that's still spreading. I mean, they talk to their friends. They're really, really good about helping others around them and sharing the gospel with them. So who knows the effect that it can have? Yes.
Now, did he learn the gospel in prison? The first guy. How did he get introduced to LDS?
Oh, the one that came in and then talked to us after he got out, Chuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where he was introduced to it.
How does that take place in a prison?
Well, David, he had this group that he started, and he would just go around just from cell to cell, kind of like we go door to door, and he would just invite them to church. And so at first, Chuck didn't want to come. It was kind of like Ed. He said, "There's no way, the Mormon church, nah." And so he eventually started coming. He started reading the Book of Mormon, just like we would here. It's just a little different environment. Yes.
I actually know people in Idaho that go to the Cottonwood prison and do the sacrament meeting program there that are faithful members of the church that also serve in the temple. But their calling is to go do church program in the Cottonwood prison in Idaho. And they do that every other week. So I know that the gospel gets into the prison systems.
That's true. I know that is true. I used to, and not that I thought badly of it beforehand, but I really opened my eyes to no matter what we've done, no matter who we are, the gospel still applies to us. So even though they've made the choices to get from where they were at, which isn't good, they still have that chance to accept Christ. And that was a little miracle I saw. Any other questions right now? Okay. So I was in this city called Tulare for, my first day there was July 27th, 2011. And my last full day there was February 25th, 2013. And so 2 days short of 19 months. The day I came home was my 19th month mark. I think that's pretty incredible. There's 2 wards there, and for most of the time I was in both of the wards. It's a wonderful place, a lot of good people. It's like my second home. Of course, you can't replace home, but it's wonderful. There's another family that Colton Mission Report. This is right before I was baptized, a couple weeks before. They had gone through a rough journey in their lives. About 5 years before this, they're a young couple. They had 3 kids, and they had just gone through all of these, just getting through some addiction recovery and things before, about 5 years before we had met them. And they could really see the hand of the Lord preparing them for this. But they hadn't really ever been religious. They just kind of did it because they knew it was bad. They knew that they just had to get out of that because it wasn't a good situation or anything. And so they had a friend, a co-worker that was a member, and she was talking to them one day about it, and they just felt really good about the conversation. So the member friend sent a referral for us to go visit them. And from the day that we contacted them, again, that was right before I was with Ellen Smith again, so I wasn't necessarily there. But from the day that missionaries been contacted them to baptism, I think it was 17 days. It was really fast. They went in, they taught them every day, and then I came in and I taught them every day as well, and they're baptized. It was amazing. One experience that I'd like to share, one miracle that happened was that every night, Mary, the mother, she would have a certain beverage that she liked to have right before she went to bed. And now I didn't know this beforehand, but for those of you who may not know, alcohol doesn't freeze. So you put it in the freezer, it doesn't freeze, right? Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I put my mind too. So she would have this beverage in the freezer, and she would have it about 10 o'clock at night right before she went to bed. And we had just taught the word of wisdom, and the husband, he was committed. I mean, that night he said that he drank the rest of his coffee, but then he threw the rest of it away. He threw everything else away, and he was committed to it. He said that I'm not going to touch any of that again because he knew that it was true. And she had felt the Spirit, she knew it was true, but she didn't want to let that go yet. And so a couple days later, when we asked him about it, they said that it was fine, they're doing great. But he knew that she wasn't necessarily following at all. And so he prayed and asked God to help her to stop drinking. And I think it's not a very big thing, but he said that night, he looked in the freezer before he said the prayer, and he saw the vodka that was in there, and that's when he said the prayer. And later that night, when she went to have a drink right before she went to bed, it was frozen solid.
Whoa. Awesome.
But alcohol doesn't freeze, remember that. So he called us the next day, and he was like, "Oh, guess what? The Holy Ghost froze the vodka." What? That was a really neat experience there. Yeah, they're a wonderful family. Just like every other family that I worked with, they were amazing. Yes?
Do you feel like there was one particular person or one particular family that you were truly sent on your mission for?
I feel like there are a lot of people, especially with the whole time I spent in Tulare. I felt that wasn't a mistake. One family that I worked with, there's the Story family, and I wasn't there. Let's see, it was Ben and Veronica, and they have 3 kids. 2 of them are in their 20s or older. One of them was 12, and he works construction. He actually worked on the Brigham City Temple, and so they took this trip. They stayed there the whole summer. This is 2 summers ago, I think. And well, as he worked on it, and she stayed with him. And missionaries, of course, knocked on their door randomly. It was a coincidence, right? And they started teaching them. And she was baptized there. And then he was baptized a little later, once they came back to Tulare, and along with their son. And she actually told me, she said that, I was there for when they came back from the trip to just when I left. And she just gone to the temple right before I left. And she actually told me, she said that she felt that I was sent here for her family. And I really felt that those are some of the people that I really had a connection with, that I perhaps knew before this life that I was sent to find. So. Any other questions? I've been thinking of something. There there's a lot of excitement in the Spanish group before I left. Hopefully, by the next month or so, there's going to be a branch there, which is really exciting because right now it's a group. Really, the only difference is with a branch, there's going to be the leadership that's Hispanic and speaks Spanish. Right now, it's under the English portion of it. But and a lot of miracles happen there. There's 2 families that were baptized in the past six months that have really contributed a lot to it. And one of them is the Gonzalez family. And Wendy and Raul. Now, I think Wendy's uncle, he was visiting the Word for some reason, and he brought along their 12-year-old son, Kevin. And it was just kind of random. He came up to us and he said, "Hey, I've got some family that's in town." And it was a completely different name than them. I still don't know whose name he gave us. But he said they're interested. Go knock on the door and teach them. Okay, so we went over there. And we asked that person. They were like, "Well, they're not here, but if you want to come to church." Okay. And so we started teaching them. And they were old. And they came to church right away. They came to church every week. And we talked a lot to them about baptism. And they knew they needed to get baptized, especially Raul, the father. He really wanted to. But Wendy, the mother, she was a little more hesitant. Not that she just wanted to wait a while. She wanted her uncle to baptize her. It was going to be about 3 months. And we knew that if she waited that long, that things could happen and she might fall away. So we knew that she needed to be baptized soon. And we couldn't get her to realize that. And there's a former investigator. I may have known her. I never found out who it was. But she talked to her and she started telling her all these things, bad things about the church, and how she found this website that explained the true things about Joseph Smith. Of course, it wasn't from the church's website, so it wasn't true. But and so she started doubting. She thought, "Well, are these things true?" You know. And Kevin, the one that came to church that first week with his uncle, he. This is a moment where I was really proud of him. And he grabbed the Book of Mormon and he said, "No, Mom, this is what she's saying is wrong." And the thing that she had heard is that Joseph Smith didn't really believe in God, that he worshipped Satan. And he read in there that, I know it's crazy, but he read to her in there that this is a book about Jesus Christ. How can somebody that believes in, that worships Satan have, done something like this? And this must be true. And he bore his testimony to her. And he wasn't even baptized. They've been coming to church for maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And after that experience, she realized that if she keeps waiting, things like that were going to happen. And so about 2 weeks later, they're baptized, their whole family. And that was a really special experience for me to watch, just to see their testimonies grow, even though they weren't members yet, they weren't. But even, especially someone that young, 12 years old, he was deacon age. And shortly after that, he received the priesthood. And then he spoke in the sacrament meeting. It was the first youth Spanish speaker that the group, or there's a branch before, the branch has ever seen come actually from the group to speak in sacrament meeting. So that was a really cool thing to see. Any questions? Another story, Hispanic family. I guess not a family, a person. We contacted them, it was Alfonso Barbosa, and we lived in these apartment complexes. It wasn't the best place, but for missionaries, I didn't really see that stuff, but it was a pretty rough place. And they were walking past us as we were going to do some service. We did service to the Salvation Army every week. And so they walked past us and we were getting to our car, and we were on an exchange with the other elders in Tulare at the time. And so I was actually with Elder Neesmith, who was my companion later, and he was in Tulare at the same time. And then my companion was with his companion. And Elder Neesmith's companion stopped Alfonso. He was carrying some 12 packs of soda up to his room. And he stopped and started talking to him and offered to help him, and they went off. And Elder Neesmith and I were kind of like, "Oh, come on, we're going to be late. We're already running late. We're going to be late for this appointment we have to do service." And we were kind of griping about it. And they came back and they were like, "Oh yeah, he's solid. He's going to get baptized." And we're like, "Yeah." And so we go do the service and everything, and we came back for the appointment that I set up with him. And he was a great guy. He had a lot of problems that he had to overcome. But I learned a really great lesson there. That I was judging him by what other missionaries said, and just by the things that he did. but I realized that, and even so, he was able to take care of all that in his life, and he was baptized about a month later. That was an eye-opener for me. That was really the first baptism where I saw things like that, where they really had to overcome a lot of those worldly things in order to make that covenant with their Heavenly Father. And that strengthened my testimony to see that that's possible. And it helps me every day to know that it's still possible for all of us. Yes?
Colton, did you have some kind of a program that you would follow up with some of the new people who were baptized, you know, to keep them going and advancing in the gospel?
Yeah. There's the new member lessons after someone's baptized. Usually it can be the missionaries, but usually someone from the Word goes back and they teach them the lessons over again to kind of go through it. And it's more of a thorough thing. So, because when you teach the first time, especially, I mean, for those of you who have ever taught in school or teachers or anything, when you teach something the first time to anybody, it usually goes right over the head. I mean, they get some things. And so, once you go back and with more detail, they understand those things more. And so I guess that's part of it. So that's actually the part of it. But yes, sir.
What's the most important thing you probably think you took out of your mission? I mean, something that affected your learn about yourself.
That's a good question. It's a hard question. There's a lot of things. I think the biggest thing that I took out of it was really the importance of the gospel. And that might sound kind of cliche, like, oh yeah, of course. But really, I've realized how important that is. That's more important than anything else we do in this life, is the gospel. And bring it to anything else. I mean, you look at all the things that I had to give up that I liked for a mission. I mean, video games, movies, just going and doing stupid things, going and having fun. All those things I realized that the gospel is a lot more important than those things. And I would take the gospel over those things. Every time. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that I learned.
Tell us about your mission president.
Who is he again? Let's see. His name is Larry Kellix, and he was the head coach of the Highland Rugby team. Some of you might not know who that is, but if you've seen the movie Forever Strong, that's that team, the Highland Rugby. And he was an amazing man, probably the most inspired man I have ever met. He just had a way of speaking to people, and especially, I mean, individually as well as to a group. He just caught your attention, and just a great man. And he's really good at motivating people and getting people going. Of course, you see his rugby team is very successful. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I mean, they've had like several hundred wins to only like 12 losses or something, as far as like.
He won the national title 28 out of 30 times.
Something
and
like
the
that.
other two, I think he came in second. That's the national.
Yeah. So I think there was only one year where they didn't make either first or second place. And this started in like 85, I want to say, something like that. Yeah. So the early 80s. So since then, they've only had 1 year where, anyways, that's pretty cool. He's really good at just getting things going and working with young people. And so he's perfect at what he does. Yeah, he's really he's amazing. Yeah.
I'm walking late, so I don't know if this question's already been asked. So
I don't worry about it.
hopefully not. But what advice would you give to a young adult who is considering going on a mission, has a desire to serve and to make a difference in the world, but sometimes it's like everybody does, they have feelings of inadequacy or, oh, I can't do this, or once they get halfway through and get overwhelmed. Is there any advice?
Yeah, I think so. I can have a lot of advice. My brothers can probably tell you that I can talk a lot about that. But I know when I started my mission, the MTC was an interesting experience. I'll talk about that in a second. But when I got in the field, I felt very inadequate. I felt like I hadn't learned any Spanish in the MTC. I had no idea what they were saying. And I had that overwhelming feeling like how am I possibly going to do this? And that's where I learned that the Lord really is closer to us than we realize. He is, I mean, I don't even think, I don't fully realize it right now how close He is involved in all of our lives. But even as a teenager, going through that change in life and thinking about a mission, thinking about other things, He, even sometimes when we don't let Him, He's there watching over us all the time. And I would strongly encourage you, if you've thought about going on a mission, if you're that age, male or female, to consider it and to pray about it. It's the best thing that you can ever do in your life. Doesn't matter what you've done so far. It doesn't matter. That's the best thing that you can do, to prepare yourself for everything, for work, for marriage, for further callings in the church, for your family, for raising a family. And and like I said, male or female, doesn't matter. It helps with everything that you'll do for the rest of your life. And that's something I wish I understood more before my mission. Because heck, you can get a lot out of this. And you definitely can and will. I would suggest if...
Tell about the first time, because this goes along with, when you had to give your first blessing to somebody in Spanish. Tell about that, how the Lord helped you.
All right, yeah, that's a good story. My mom remembers stories sometimes more than I do, especially at the beginning of my mission. Some of them kind of laugh when she brings them up. Oh yeah, I remember that. Anyways, this is my first night in the field. I was in Porterville, California, in the Spanish branch there. And my companion with him was Elder Munoz. And he was originally from Mexico, so he was fluent. And I had no idea what everyone was saying. And this family asked that we would give a blessing to their kids who were sick. And so I know I butchered their names. I don't even remember what the names were. To this day, I don't remember what they are. But I just remember that I was struggling to say the words, but I just remember that I said the words. I was able to get that out, even though I didn't really know the language. I'd never given a blessing. I never even thought about giving a blessing in Spanish. I just figured out how to give a blessing in English. And I was getting a little confident in that. I'd done it a couple times. And so in Spanish, it was a little overwhelming, but I was able to do that. And that's an example of how the Lord takes you where you're at, and He helps you. And if you put in the effort, He will be there to help you, no matter what it is. Whether you're giving a blessing to somebody or anything else, He will help you through it. Yeah.
On that same note, did you ever get to a point where you just got to discouraged and just want to throw your hands up and say, I want to go home, or?
There wasn't a time where I was seriously considering, like, I want to go home. But that first transfer, there were several instances where I wasn't getting along with my companion, and then I couldn't understand anything anybody was saying, and I felt like my companion didn't understand it, and I felt like the whole world was against me. And yeah, I felt like that. I kind of slipped in a little bit of depression because I felt like I was trying my hardest, yet I wasn't seeing any results at the time. And it was really hard. But I just told myself that it would get better. I knew that if I just put my effort in, that it would get better. And it did. The next transfer, it felt like the next transfer I was with a companion who wasn't a native speaker, but his Spanish was pretty good. And he helped me to be more independent in things. We'd go on, he was a district leader, so we would go on splits or exchanges with the missionaries. And so I would have to leave the area with somebody who didn't speak Spanish. That's hard. When you don't know Spanish and you're leaving the area with someone who doesn't speak Spanish either, or hasn't even been trained at all in Spanish. So that really helped me. After that, I gained that confidence. Yeah.
Didn't you feel that the Spanish-speaking people enjoyed you being there, not being able to speak Spanish? Don't you think they enjoyed, helping you along, trying to listen to you, laughing with you?
Yeah, definitely.
I had that experience trying to speak Spanish too in Spain. But the people loved it. They loved that you were trying.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've seen missionaries who just don't try, and it's not very. I can see from people's perspective that it's just like, really, you're not gonna try to speak our language? Like, how, you know? But when they see that you're really trying, even though you're messing up a lot, and that's where the laughing comes in, they really respect that. They love that. So yeah, I saw that a lot on my mission. Even the last part of my mission, I would mess up on something. It was good. They loved helping.